With this session update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. As week 2 of negotiations over the state's next 2-year budget begins, Governor Tim Walz, Senate Majority Leader Gazelka, and House Speaker Melissa Hortman separately spoke to the media about progress toward a new state budget. Here are those media availabilities.
Well, welcome everyone. Just a brief update in between things. Good momentum. You're seeing bills move off the House floor. Obviously, they'll come on the ones that are a little less contentious will come first. That's what you're seeing happen. I think some of the bigger items that we're getting to, certainly education and public safety, good movement, work late into the night last night and over the weekend. And I think coming to that place that many of us knew we would get to, trying to find common ground for Minnesota, but also recognizing some of those most divisive of things are probably not going to get done or probably going to have to wait to another day. So still every intention, and I feel very strongly about this, while we should have been done in May, there's certainly no reasons that we wouldn't finish now. From a state's perspective, this is closer than we would like to be, and so we have to take precautionary measures. Those things start to kick into place, but we've still got a little bit of time, and I would guess, watching the legislature work, they feel the sense of urgency that today is the day to really get most of this stuff done. So it's going. It's slow work in a divided legislature. We all knew that was going to happen, but it is still work. It's still moving, and those fits and starts that happen every year are happening, but it feels to me like, especially over this weekend, the sticking points got moved beyond quicker than they normally do because of the deadline that is real now. Folks who told me May 15th wasn't a real deadline, May 30th wasn't a real deadline, are now starting to feel like June 21st is a real deadline. So I'm hopeful, but glad to take a few questions.
Governor, you had to start taking additional steps to prepare for the possibility of a shutdown. You had mentioned last week state park reservations, those types of things. What is going on behind the scenes with your
there'll be letters going out to people who receive a myriad of state services. Those will go out today, just alerting folks of what's happening. Obviously, last month we had to, due to contracts, send out the information to state employees. You're right about the reservations, of letting people know that we may not be able to honor those reservations. And then we're really looking at, and I'll go back and check on this because we're hoping we can get something done today, and this will be a moot point, around transportation and the contracts. We're going to have to start talking to those contractors on roads and bridges by Thursday, I believe, that we will have to start slowing and shutting those down. And again, as I said in May, and I continue to say, there's costs incurred on this, and there's a lot of time and a lot of at this point in time, not a lot of impact to the public, but there will be. If this goes much longer, they'll start to feel those things. So it's just the precautionary, the preliminary things, but every day that goes by, that'll start ramping up more and more. And then certainly, if it goes beyond this week, then we have to start taking the real actions, because we can't honor those requests, we can't keep the contracts going, and we have to start thinking what that looks like. And then, of course, all of our agencies have the contingency plans that were in place but are being updated on what I think is a very realistic and pretty harsh view of the 2017 court ruling of what it means for state agencies. And we're having those conversations. I spoke Saturday evening with Commissioner Snell from Corrections, for example, of what exactly does that mean. So it'd be best to have those be hypotheticals and for us to finish this thing today or tomorrow.
To be clear, if that transportation bill gets passed this week, that'll prevent any kind of rollback or construction projects?
And again, I want to sit down with the commissioner to get more clarity on that. We're just too close now that I want to understand what those are. The way I understand it is that this week it'll get really difficult at Thursday, so that's why the hope is to try and move those. And I think you see the House is now starting to take up those bills, starting to move them, get them to the desk.
Can you describe what you might do to help essential workers? One of the 4 uses of federal dollars in the ARA, and what the state of Minnesota might do.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. The American Rescue Plan, again, that was passed, and in the signing statement, President Biden was very clear that these were meant to help those communities and those industries and those businesses most directly impacted by COVID. And we think those essential workers, whether they be nursing home workers, food production workers, grocery store, folks that were on the front line, that many had no choice but to go to work, wear a mask if they could, and kind of just take their chances. Many of them, if they got sick or they got quarantined, had no pay. They were asked to stay at home. And so I think we're getting very close on an agreement that would allow us to move some of this federal money directly to them in the forms of relief checks to help make up for some of that.
Okay, I don't want to describe it this way, but your money or their money? Meaning part of your $500 million or part of the area?
Yeah, yes, part of the bigger piece that went to the legislature. We still have now in approximately that 500, keep in mind that we spent 75 right away on summer school. There was some things in there around COVID. We're setting at about 370 and looking at what that would mean for long-term management of COVID as more like, flu or seasonal things. So it is coming out of that broader pot.
More details on what these sticking points are and what might have to, as you described, possibly fall away to get a deal done on time?
Well, I think some of them are the philosophical differences. I wished we weren't, but we're having discussions about the last election, for example, and voting security. And those are things that we're going to have to overcome to move on. And then public safety issues that, again, of trying to figure out how do you make sure that public safety as a whole and that everyone feels a part of that public safety and that the proposals we're putting in place are acceptable. And I think some of those have been somewhat challenging. The interesting thing, in a very Minnesota interesting way, is it's not the dollars this time because our state finances are solid, our rainy day funds are solid, and the Recovery Act dollars are solid. With that being the case, much of this negotiation is less about money than it is about the ideological differences of where you're going. And so that we're trying to get by. And it becomes a challenge then because if you go to kind of a default position that will just throw out all of these ideas, that becomes very frustrating in terms of that there's good things in there, there's good policy proposals that, again, that you just update and change that won't make it in. So it's more of the ideological right now, I think, where some of those sticking points where you can imagine. And then there's always a concern, I think, around what programs are being put in place, and we live in a society where everything you do is now a slippery slope to something much broader. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just this, and that's the discussions we're having.
So in your conversations with Commissioner Snell, what did he tell you was the hypothetical? If you don't,
he's still trying to understand. It's going to be my intention, and we will have to go to court over it. There's an interpretation that says we can't fund these services, and we would have to theoretically open the doors. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. The question will be is how do I legally then keep that open, and how do I pay people to manage that service where the courts, in our interpretation, I think, said you can't do that. You can't, well, the last time this happened. So I'm talking to him about what does a bare bones, lights on DOC look like? What does it do? And I'm sure the problem with that is that we would have to be very careful all those services that we provide outside of just incarcerating someone would probably have to stop. But our intention, and again, this is, I think, to let Minnesotans, none of this is about to scare people, but there's a very clear court case, in our opinion, that described what happens if you can't get this work done and what closes down. Public safety has to be a priority, Department of Corrections, but we can't just, I think it's frustrating for me. We know we're going to get this done. Everybody knows we have to eventually get it done, but I can't just tell the road contractors, it'll get done, don't worry about it. The legality of this says we have to shut those contracts because we don't have the money to be able to pay for them in writing and in law.
So let me just clarify, I just want to make sure I understand this. Your belief, your interpretation is that you can't fund these things, but your position is, I'm going to fund them anyways, as legally as I can.
I think so. On the public safety side, I have to do that, but I think Minnesotans need to recognize is, and I certainly will adhere to what the courts say, there will probably be a challenge if it gets to that point. I just keep coming back to, and I get the feeling, you've asked all of them, they've been out here, I don't believe that anyone doesn't believe this is serious. I don't anybody thinks that this is a game that you can play chicken with. I think all the legislative leaders believe that this is truly a bad thing to get to July 1st.
Hey, Governor, what about those jobs in Cohasset? That's a pretty big deal.
It's a big deal. I like that project. I've been involved with that project, the Frontier Project, for a while, and talking to them. I think it's a big deal. It ended up in this negotiation. Whether that was right or wrong, that's where it's at. We'll get that thing through. It'll make a difference. Those are, this is, from the timber industry, this is kind of one of the first big things we've seen in decades around that, and I think is a real positive. So
it sounds like several chairs are talking about deconstructing the bonding bill and putting elements of it into other bills, broadband into jobs, for example. Are you involved in that?
Not so much. This is House stuff. I think we should have a bonding bill. I think it should be straight up. I think they work that way. We're aware of they're trying to do that. This is part of the deal making, and I think what's very challenging for people to understand, that divided legislature, the House and Senate, is always going to have some differences. Being divided, of them trying to work together, and then the third part of trying to work with the administration to get it, gets pretty challenging, because it's not as clear as just the Democratic House is working with us, as opposed to the Republican Senate. It's much more complex, especially when you get into this piece. So I know there's some talk about that. The problem with that is the minute you start to deconstruct, it's the proverbial squeezing of the balloon. It shoots out somewhere else. So you start to move these things. For example, this forest products project we're looking at, it starts to impact other things. So we're kind of at that point. I've been saying for quite some time to button this thing up as tight as we could, and especially when it comes to some of these bonding things, we may have to wait till another, because again, as all of us know, it's going to take the minority's support in the House to get that done, and I've not seen a strong desire to get that. Tom?
Two-part question on public safety. Do you agree with Speaker Hortman and others that public safety, police reform will be the hardest and probably the last thing agreed to? And secondly, the University of Minnesota is dealing with a lot of violence right on campus. There was a shooting, 5 people shot in Dinkytown over the weekend, and Joan Gable's trying to figure out who's going to patrol the campus and the areas around the campus. Can you address those two issues? First, how difficult will it be to agree, and then the U of M?
Yeah, I think the public safety piece will be. I think one of the things is, because it is a challenge, it's a challenge across the country. We had a shooting in St. Cloud, too, last night. We have those types of things that their violence, crime overall is down, but violent crime is up. It's up here, it's up across the country. We do have to address it. And then, of course, the police reform piece that people are asking for, making sure you're not pulled over and in a confrontation over an air freshener or whatever it might be. So I do think that's going to be a hard one, because there's a reality of making public safety, funding public safety, and getting the reforms. At the same time, understanding it's become really politically charged. And as far as the University of Minnesota, of course, most know they have their own police force. The president has some say over that. They're also, of course, part of the city and the county that partner with them to make that happen. So we're watching it closely. We're watching as some of these plans come up, and I think most folks recognize that while you're addressing the immediate concerns of crime, you're going to have to go back and figure out the systemic issues of where this is coming from: increased gang activity, lack of good intel on what's happening. Some of the capacity in these agencies has been lost. I had put out a proposal that was very controversial for the left and the right, the idea of a fusion center where we would gather this information collectively, all of us together, and start understanding how could you apply that to the local jurisdictions. That was not accepted by anyone, but we're kind of at that point right now on a question like this. What happens to that authority? Who's responsible for it? What happens when it's inside another entity, and who's going to get it done? And then the thing we're talking about is things like Minnesota Heals and Frontline. How do we make sure that these community groups that are out there breaking the chain of this violence, whether it's black pastors or whether it's some of the community groups that are forming after these incidents, we should be doing more with that. And I think those are the discussions in the public safety bill. But I do share concerns around that. I do think, though, watching how they're going to address it, it's going to be both the short term, but again, you're much better off if you have the intel ahead of time. You break the chain of these types of things. You make it harder for these things to happen, rather than just hoping you have just a sheer force that's there to catch somebody in the act. So.
We got to get you each year.
We'll try and get this done. We'll try and stay updated a little bit more. The team will get us on that. We'll go late in tonight. My guess would be is that hopefully today you'll see some of these bigger things maybe start to shake loose. But I remain really optimistic. Talks are still happening. They're still cordial. So thank you.
Well, good afternoon. As you are aware, we're starting to pass bills off the Senate floor that came from the House. So that means that their bills are starting to go to the governor, which means the process really is in earnest now. We had legacy went off the floor today that already came from the House. We have higher ed that's going to the governor. Tomorrow it'll likely be jobs and some other bills. So you'll see the bills just starting to go forward now. There's some questions about what's not done yet. If HHS is not done, it's very, very close. I mean, I think it's done, but if it's not, it's very close. Same thing with K-12 or E-12. That one is also in that exact same place where I think we've agreed, but it's dotting the final line that we just have to make sure. The public safety bill has a little more work to do, and state government even less than judiciary. So those are the ones that are all moving forward. It's my commitment that we not get to July 1. I just think that would be really bad for Minnesota. I do think that the governor and the speaker agree with that. So we're all trying to move towards that place, knowing that certain things aren't going to happen, but a lot will. And I said on the Senate floor that, look, when we pass these bills, there's going to be a lot of things that Republicans or Democrats can point to and say, that was really good for Minnesota. And there's going to be some things that each side is going to say, I wish we got that done. But that's the nature of divided government. We are the only legislative body in the country that's divided. And so considering all of that and considering going through COVID, trying to wrestle with what to do with all the federal money that came in at the last second, I think we're going to get to the spot that we need to, hopefully by the end of this week. With that, I'll take any questions on anything.
The House is taking up environment at 6:30. Is the clean cars rule, has that been worked out and a deal struck on that piece?
Yeah, so the environment bill will be moving forward. The California emission and air standards, the one that we said we really should wait. We don't want to take and adopt California or Los Angeles air standards. We don't really want to force our auto dealers to have 7% of their stock when apparently the public still only wants 1%. But we recognize that we have to close this deal up. We did get clarity that it will not be implemented till January of 2024, which means this becomes an election issue as we look forward. But where it stands right now, that is continuing to move forward as it was as we started.
Senator, can you talk about the jobs bill that's been referred back to finance? What provisions are going to be added or deleted, and do they include the refinery amendment? Yeah, so as the jobs bill is going back to finance. There's a number of issues that we need to address. One of them will be the refinery language. It was an amendment I don't think anybody expected that would go on. We want to take a look at the date. We want to take a look to see if a study is better at this time, but that is an issue we will address. And then we're just trying to figure out where's the best place to make sure broadband money gets done. That's $70 million. What do we want to do with a OSB plant that wants to come up to northern Minnesota and Rondo? Those are some of the things that we're talking about. They may not best fit in the jobs bill, so we may do something else with them. To follow up on the Rondo land bridge, is that something that your caucus supports, or do you expect that to go in a different bill? Can you tell us about that?
The question is, what about Rondo? In a big global package, the preliminary gathering information part of that, we are open to putting in a bill. Basically, we think that combined with I think it's called Frontier, but it's the OSB plant. It's a $450 million plant up in northern Minnesota that will come. And so we're just trying, this is the part where you make some deals. It's not, you don't get everything you want and you take more than you want, but in the end, that's part of that.
So are those two linked then, the OSB plant and the Rondo land bridge?
There's really about 20 things that are linked, but those are a couple of them.
Where does police reform stand at this point?
So we haven't wrapped up public safety yet. I do know there's at least 5 what we would consider police accountability measures that we would take. There's not many more that we would take, if any more. But we also know that that's the area that we have to fund the courts and the Department of Correction and all the different areas that simply must be funded. I was surprised that was where the greatest difference was between the House and the Senate. even as just a few days ago. And so we're trying to work to help the chairs and their groups manage through. One thing we've done different this year, the governor, myself, and the speaker, we don't really want the bills to come up to us. If a bill comes up to us, we circle back and try to help the committees find the solutions that they need to get it done. So it's working a little bit different this year, and that's where it's at right now.
I think the House had 12 provisions they wanted. Is 5 going to be enough to mollify them?
Well, I think so. Now, we'll see. I mean, there's just not much more will go there. I mentioned that if we feel like it's anti-police, we won't do it. And then there's other provisions that the police may or may not accept, may not want to accept. And we feel like, what are we doing right now to encourage more police officers to be on the streets, have more police, recruit more police? We don't think right now the message is really about police accountability. It's helping the police keep the streets safe. And so that's why we really would rather just wrap up right now and call it good and focus on how do we make our streets safe, how do we stand up for the people that are being victimized. We think that's a bigger issue right now.
What are the 5 you've agreed to, can you say?
No. Nice try, though.
Hypothetically, if you don't reach agreement on public safety by July 1st, then the Department of Corrections could shut down. Earlier today, Governor Walz said even though legally he believes under the current court rulings he wouldn't have the authority to fund that, he would do it anyways to the best extent legally possible to not open the doors of the jail cells and let the prisoners out. What's your position on that hypothetical?
My position is there is no hypothetical. We cannot allow the state to go to shutdown. In 2017, when the court said, look, they're not going to fund anything anymore, prior to that, they funded about 80% of the budget. So a lot of people never even knew there was a shutdown. Not this time. I talked to some folks at Teen Challenge. They've already been notified that they wouldn't get payments. So think about the courts, think about the jails, think about those facilities that help people, think about all the permits, the marriage licenses, all of the things, and then, oh, by the way, state parks and beer. I mean, those were the things that people were upset about last time, but it's much, much broader. And so I refuse to let it get to that place, and I do believe the governor and the speaker are in the same place.
Can you speak to the reinsurance issue and what arrangements you've made with the House and the governor on reinsurance?
So on reinsurance, we have found a solution. We haven't signed off on it yet, but there is reinsurance in the final agreement. We just haven't signed off on the exact. What we've agreed to is not completely signed off, but for all intents and purposes, it's just like E12 or HHS. We've agreed to it.
But that's the 1-year extension, but there's money in the account to cover the cost. Is that what you're
I can't remember if it's public or not, so I can't tell you.
Can you go into more detail about the Cohasset plant and what the legislature needs to do to move that forward?
Yeah,
is it just money, or is there more than that?
So there's money and language. I'm just calling it the OSB plant. There's another name for it, Frontier, something or another. But what I will say is the IRRB already voted to provide some resources. Between that, which we knew was there, and what we need to do at the state, it brings that company here. And like I said, it's a $450 million expansion, really important for the range. And I'm committed to getting it done. I believe everybody else is as well.
What is that additional language that you're mentioning?
Well,
just money?
It'll either be, well, it's coming out of the jobs bill. We're going to put in another one, but we're all recognize that it's important to get done.
Some sort of environmental permitting language.
Yeah, I think that language part is already in and agreed to. It's just the resources, which is frankly, I believe it's $3 million a year for 10 years. I believe that's the number.
On the refinery bill, is the concern that the House wouldn't be able to pass the same amendment, or is the concern that there are things in there that the majority caucus disagrees with?
Yeah, I'm committed to driving the trades and the business communities together to stand and fight for the jobs that they both believe in. What I don't want to do is get between the trades and the business communities. I think if they decide that they want to strike, I think that's absolutely their responsibility. But we're trying to protect jobs and bring the people together. This came up at the last second. I think a study to figure out, what are the safety issues that they're concerned about is a much better direction to go. And like I said, we're not doing right to work. We're not doing prevailing wage for the private sector. But we want to make sure that the business community and the trade community is working together. otherwise I don't want to meddle in their business.
What is the caucus's position on that bill then? I'm confused by what you're saying.
Well, we don't feel like that is ready. We feel like the direction we should go is much more a study. It was an amendment that they did not expect to get on there. It's just there was some confusion. There's multiple issues that legislators want. Some people want different things and get upset if different things are in there. So it's the interesting part. And when we're 34-33, it's difficult to manage everybody, but we're going to get to the spot we need to get to.
50 people voted for the apprenticeship thing, though, right?
Yes. Part of it's political. You don't want to get postcards in the end. The vote was really much closer than that.
If you were a handicapper, what are the chances you're still here a week from Wednesday?
0.
You'll be done this week, you believe?
Well, you said a week from Wednesday. 0.
So I can go to a family reunion in Kansas then?
You should go.
The rest of us should stay.
It's the people, it's the staff and the lobbyists and everybody that's on vacation. Now I'm thinking, what were you thinking? So.
Are you starting to talk about contingencies for the bonding bill and breaking that out into other measures?
Yeah, so yes. I mean, if we hope a bonding bill gets done, but we cannot guarantee that. It takes a supermajority, which means it takes the minorities in the House and the Senate. We think that the bonding fix bill from last year needs to go forward. There was no reason that shouldn't have gone forward, frankly, in January. And so we're working out details to get that to move by itself, and then we'll see about the rest. Broadband is a number that we can use from federal stimulus infrastructure, so we think that should go somewhere else. So one thing you guys haven't asked about is I still fully intend to end emergency powers as session ends. There's no reason that we should keep it. Just look around. I mean, each week, each day that we go later, why does the governor still have emergency powers? And so I think we will find that place at the very end, but that's one of the things that I'm focusing on.
What does the governor say about that?
I think the governor would like to keep his emergency powers, but we are making the case that the emergency is over. Across the country, you see more and more states that are giving them up. Clearly, it's time.
But housing is a big chunk of that. When do you expect that bill on the floor?
So one of the things the governor talked about that he needed emergency powers for was to make sure there was eviction moratorium language and an off-ramp for people. That's been agreed to. That is a bill that will pass as we come into the end of session.
Would you agree to some type of a hybrid where he could declare a public health emergency and then you could check off on it after 30 days?
Yeah, so public health emergencies are different than emergency powers. There are some benefits that we can get from the federal government, I believe it's through this year, and I'm open to that. It's just the emergency powers that give him the broad sweeping powers over every area of our life that we think it just needs to end. All right, thank you guys. Take care.
So I wasn't planning to come and chat with y'all, but since Senator Gazelka did and the governor did, I figured I would just say a few brief words and give people a chance to ask questions. Hopefully what you hear from me is pretty consistent with what you heard from the two other gentlemen. So, you know, the main guts of the deal were decided on May 16th at 11:58 p.m. and now we're filling in the details. It's a little bit color by number at this point, because we've set the targets for all of the bills. And in the global targets, the goal is to have balance between getting Republican wins and Democratic wins because we have divided government. And now we bring that down to each of the bills. Fortunately, there are a number of chairs who finished their work and don't have any questions they want us to resolve. State government sounds like it's wrapped. I think environment is wrapped. There may be a couple questions going up to leadership before that gets posted. The 4 that we've done already, I don't think there was any leadership involvement to get those done. HHS needed quite a bit of clarification because the federal money is so complicated there, and there are other funds that interplay with the Health and Human Services budget other than just the general fund. So I think they got everything they needed by the first Friday in June. So they got a little slow start, but my understanding is the reviser is working on putting their bill together and they have a mostly final spreadsheet. Transportation is ready to go. So that's exciting because I think if we don't pass the transportation bill by Wednesday or Thursday, there could potentially be some impact on contractors. I'm not the person who's got the direct information on that. You could ask MnDOT. But to the extent that that's true, there's no reason we can't expedite that bill. I've asked Minority Leader Doubt to consider whether we could take that up under a suspension of the rules today or tomorrow. And he was going to talk to his team and let us know on that. But we're getting really close. We're ironing out some sticking points in E12 this afternoon. Public safety probably won't get done today. There's some hope that we would make an announcement of what's in E12 and there'd be a spreadsheet. Probably won't be language for a day. But public safety will be difficult. It's complicated and heart-wrenching of a bill to put together. The other thing that's a little bit complicated, I know I'm missed logistics and process, is that the chairs met for several weeks and they made exchanges back and forth. And so we want to make sure that when the leaders took over, that to the extent there were agreements we need to carry forward, that we're doing that. And all of these bills have very complicated spreadsheets and a lot of policy, so we want to make sure that we get it right, where we don't think we've agreed, and then we get a writing and find out, oh no, there's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't agree on. So it's a little bit the boring grind part in both E12 and public safety. And my hope would be that we would be done by Friday. That might be optimistic, but the sooner that we can get done, the better. I don't think anybody should have any extra stress in their life being concerned about whether we will get done on time. Senator Gazelka, I, and the governor are committed to finishing.
Since you called yourself Miss Process and Logistics, what is your view, your take on what we've seen from House Republicans the last few days?
Well, in 17 years in this institution, I've never seen such a flagrant abuse of the process and so many rule violations. We had, when I was the minority leader in 2017 and 2018, one filibuster, 7 hours long on the preemption bill because we felt very strongly about that. We wanted to make our point. We took 7 hours to make that point. We didn't want any Minnesotan to miss the fact that we were opposed to that bill. I think that's a little bit different than 14 hours Thursday, 14 hours Friday, 13 hours Saturday. I think that's disrespectful to the staff, it's disrespectful of the members, it's disrespectful to the institution, and unnecessary, because the issues that Representative Doubt are concerned about are issues that Senator Gazelka has been negotiating ferociously through the whole time. Reinsurance has been a recurring topic of conversation. Bringing the peacetime emergency to an end has been a recurring topic of conversation. Between the House and the Senate, we've had a recurring conversation about running the bonding bill technical corrections as a standalone. And then Representative Doubt wanted us to terminate the federal $300 a week subsidy for folks getting unemployment. We're not going to do that. If I have to be cruel to Minnesotans and damage the economy to get Kurt Doubt to shut up, I'm not interested. And then his last condition we're also working on, which is how to deal with federal funds coming in the future to the state of Minnesota and making sure that there's an appropriate understanding of how those get appropriated. So it was entirely unnecessary. It was bad for the institution, it was bad for relationships, and thankfully it's behind us.
Today is not another chapter of that? Or?
Well, the TV's on mute in my office. It appears that they're debating the rules a lot. You know, we allowed a lot of rule violations to go over the last 3 days, kind of gave them a full and fair opportunity to make idiots of themselves, which they took us up on. And we need to get people back on track, respecting the rules of the House. It's fine to debate the bills. There's some of the bills that have complicated policy provisions that we can really go back and forth for a long time. What's not fine is to over-personalize and become bitter. That doesn't get us any closer to understanding each other or getting things done.
Can you comment on state government? It sounds like that might be finished, but I had heard, I think the governor maybe said there was still questions about voting issues. Are those resolved or not?
I think that Senator Kiffmeyer and Representative Nelson worked out some language on Dropbox security that everybody can live with.
Senator Gazelka said that the one thing he's going to hold out for at the end of this special session is ending the emergency powers. Has that been part of the discussions between the three of you?
He's been really clear since last summer that he would like to see that end, that he doesn't believe that there is that kind of an emergency anymore. And so it has been an off and on constant topic of conversation, and particularly with regard to getting this budget done and getting out of here. And we've had extensive conversations with the governor where we've gone through each of the executive orders and the timeline for each of them to sunset. There's actually very few executive orders that are still in effect as of July 1st. Really no restrictions on businesses. There's no face masks. For the most part, Minnesotans have returned to life as normal. We have a lot of Minnesotans we have to get vaccinated that are, a tougher audience to get in and to get vaccinated, either because they're skeptical or because they work a lot. And so it's challenging to get them in. So we want to make sure that the governor has the powers he needs to get folks vaccinated. The other thing is, I'm sure you're all reading a lot about the Delta variant. I'm not reading enough about the Delta variant because I'm trying to figure out what happened between Chamberlain and Dabney over the last 6 weeks. But the governor has to be ready to respond whatever happens in the fall. And he needs enough authority that's clear enough in state law so that if he needs to consider remedies, that he's got that power.
So you would continue to back his emergency powers as long as the governor still wants them?
Right. I think that there's a negotiated end that makes sense. I think there's a point in time where the governor would say we don't need them, or we only need a couple of things, and if you give me that authority in law, we're good. So I think we can get there.
By the end of session, if the off-ramp on the eviction moratorium is passed, which we expect, do you think there will be a vote on the House floor that will allow people to vote to withdraw the emergency powers and that bill will pass?
I think that will be the case.
Last bill or anything like that? Is it symbolic in that way?
I mean, it's no mystery to people who hang around here. The Senate is likely to hold the state government finance bill hostage that funds the governor, and the House is likely to hold the tax bill hostage because it must originate in the House and it is the Senate's #1 priority. And we won't let those go until we're sure what the other side is going to do with them.
But this bill that Peter asked about, it wouldn't be immediate. It would be for a future date, right?
I think there's conversation about that to be had. But honestly, right now we're really focused on wrapping E12 and public safety. And we know we need to talk about that, but that's one of kind of the last pieces that will come into place.
But big picture, it's not really a question of if, but when.
Right. I think the governor would say that as well. I mean, I think if you asked him that question, how long do you foresee needing them? He would say the same thing I did: vaccines, testing, let me be prepared for whatever happens this fall. And with regard to the rest of it, let's talk about it.
But there are two ways to get there. One is to allow the emperor to give them up, and the other is to have the legislative body say, this is when thou shalt give them up.
There's a combination approach. The legislature could pass a bill that says at a date in the future they will be done, and the governor could sign that bill into law. And then it's a team project.
Time for one that is left to be done, and the processing of bills that needs to be done. Is Friday a little overly optimistic, thinking you can be done by then?
Yes, but my garden really needs to be weeded, so I was hopeful on that. We're not leaving until we are done, so that means it could be a pretty intensive weekend on the 26th and 27th. I am pressing my chairs and the reviser and House Fiscal to getting these bills done is urgent, and this is the moment in time where if they need to stay up all night to get these things done, they need to get them done so we can get them posted, so we can get them passed.
Can you tell us about the pairing of the Rondo land bridge and the Frontier OSP project?
Yeah, the governor and Iron Range legislators are really supportive of Project OSB, and this is a common thing in the legislature where we try to achieve balance. Something that's done for one region is counterbalanced by something we do for another region. And the communities working on healing Rondo have been rightfully asking for some assistance to explore options for how to heal that rift. And I think it's an appropriate counterbalance.
Thanks, everyone.